Hi friends, thank you so much for joining me for today's video. It is all about simple stamping and a fun partial die cut technique that you are going to love. So stick around and assemble this card with me. I'm featuring the Seraphim Wings stamp set and coordinating die from Unity Stamp Company today. I'm just going to be stamping it on some of their Country Lovin' paper pack. I love this text background paper. It's one of my favorites. I use it over and over and over again. I could have a whole pack of just this pattern. And I'm going to be stamping that butterfly with Evergreen Bough Distress ink. And this is going to take quite a few layers. This is a highly detailed stamp, and I'm just going to keep stamping and getting every single detail of that beautiful butterfly. Sometimes these big stamps just need a little bit extra ink and pressure in certain areas, and a stamping platform makes repeat stamping so easy. Next, I'm going to cover this with clear embossing powder and then melt that with my heat tool. I don't want to lose the definition of this butterfly when I add some water to it later, so I want to make sure that those lines stay nice and crisp, so I'm sealing them in with some clear embossing powder. And once that's fully melted, grab your die and we'll do some partial die cutting. I have a Big Shot die cut machine, and this is how I will do partial die cutting. It may be a little bit different on your machine, so you'll have to look that up with your machine's directions. But what I like to do is to line up where I want my cut line on the edge of my plate. That way, the die that is actually on the plate, which is to the left of my cut line, will cut, and anything hanging off the top will not cut. So I don't want the top of the butterfly to be cut off. I only want the bottom portion. So I'm using a pencil line to give me an idea of where that is, since I die cut opposite. I like to die cut up into my plates. You could flip this around and die cut down into a plate so you could see the die and the edge of your paper if that is easier for you. Either way works. I just find I get a cleaner cut when I die cut up into my plates. So I have my line. I'm going to make sure that my paper is even, and then I'm going to place my plates and then roll this through my die cut machine. You can go all the way through because, again, anything hanging off the top of the plate will not cut. I just stopped and then rolled back through so I could get a double cut. And then we're just going to remove that from the die cut machine and remove our die. And now I want to trim this down to fit the front of my card panel. I want it at an angle, so I'm kind of lining that up with the edge of my background paper that I'm using for the front of my card. It's an A2 size panel, so 4¼ by 5½, and then I'm using my pencil lines to give me a guide on where I'm going to trim down my butterfly. Now, when you use your trimmer, make sure you don't trim off your bottom wings. We only want to trim off the top. So I'm lining up my line, and then I'll cut that. And this didn't cut the bottom of my butterfly wings, so that was perfectly fine. Now this one was a little more tricky. I didn't want to cut off that bottom butterfly wing. So I tore off my extra, and then I'm using my pencil lines and making sure I stop cutting before I get to that bottom wing. And then this will create our popped up panel for the front of our card. Next up, I'm going to do a little bit of coloring with some ink smooshing. I have worn lipstick from Distress Inks. I added a little bit of water, and then I'm just picking that up and smooshing that down with a small block. And that's going to add just a little bit of color to the background of this butterfly. I'm also going to do the same thing with a little bit more of that evergreen bough. And then with Vintage Photo, I'm going to ink blend around the edges and then over that ink smooshing so it really pops. This is a piece of paper from Blossom Avenue, also by Unity Stamp Company, and I just ink blended around the edge of that as well to tie in all those layers. I'm going to stamp the sentiment from the stamp set in the bottom corner using some VersaFine Clair Pinecone ink. Add a bit of foam tape behind my butterfly panel and pop that up. And then I also have a strip of that pattern paper, and then I'm going to add a few little staples to the edge and then glue that right at the top of my panel. And then to finish everything off and to add in just a real pop of color, it just needed something. I added some yellow enamel dots to really finish off the look of this card. I really hope you enjoyed the partial die cutting technique that you can use with this big, beautiful butterfly for really wonderful cards and wishes. Thank you so much for creating with me. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again soon for another video. Bye.